Hi, my name is Drew Hawkins, and I will be presenting on the reality of religion, an analysis on discrimination against a majority religions in the United States, and how we might be able to end the hatred. I want you to imagine with me for a second that you're a little boy or girl from Syria that arrived in the United States in the early years of your life after escaping the Syrian refugee crisis. As you grew up, you were fervent to know Allah more and respected your classmates and family greatly out of love and dignity for the religion of Islam. And then one day you go to school and you're approached by another classmate who begins to yell and scream at you that you are a terrorist, just like he hears his dad say at home. And as you go home, you're angry, but you're also hurt. And the questions of doubt and confusion begin to settle in as you stumble, fall, and crumble to the floor, grasping for breath as you question, why? Don't you see? We're all the same, but with different backgrounds and stories. Sometimes the pressures of life seem too great, and everything we once thought we knew comes crashing down upon us. As the storm of unfathomably confusing questions whirls around us, questions like, why am I here and what is my purpose? And then almost suddenly, the wind stops, and we begin to believe something greater than ourselves. For reasons beyond my limited human comprehension, these questions I truly do believe may just be the deepest questions one might ask themselves during the course of their life. Each of us may believe something different than our peers when it comes to religion, but one thing still stands. We all believe something, even those who don't claim a religion at all. Yet, here we are in a land of quote-unquote religious freedom, as the mountains of discriminatory speech and actions against those who believe differently than us still stand in our selfish and naturally wicked hearts. And whether intentionally or unintentionally, millions of Americans are being discriminated against because of what they believe. People just like me and just like you. People who at some point get broken down by this desperately confused world and begin to ask the question, why? Some of you may be offended. And I must pause here to say that it is not my intention to offend anyone. Rather, I truly think that only when you and I begin to tear down the walls of selfish discrimination coming from our own lives, will we then be able to fight against religious discrimination outside of us. So let's get into the beef, shall we? There are three majority religions in our world today: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And all three of them are present in America. Today, roughly 70% of Americans claim to be Christian, both Protestants and Catholics, while Jews and Muslims make up around 8% of the population. And finally, the religious unaffiliated, or religious nuns, round up the numbers with about 22%, according to a poll taken by Pew Research in 2019. Well, now that we know the numbers, how do we know that they are being discriminated against? Well, universally speaking, religious discrimination is defined as persecution against any or all particular religions in places like the workplace, home, and community. But how can we be sure that religious discrimination is happening in the U.S.? According to George Yancey, a sociologist and professor of sociology at Baylor University, begins his article by telling us that 1 out of every 2 Christians in America believe they face discrimination in places like their community, workplace, and home, according to a poll taken by his own work last year. Peter Gatashok, a professor of religion at Wesleyan University, tells us that from time to time, American antagonism toward Islamic and Jewish traditions goes back hundreds of years. And often, these beliefs are seen by Americans as being antithetical to certain ideas of Americanness. Ideologies like Islamophobia, which is the irrational fear and or hatred of Muslims, and anti-Semitism, which is discrimination towards Jews, have both been around since the formation of hate groups like the KKK, and even more recently, the Twin Tower attacks on September 11th, 2001. Well, it would be clear that these two men are not wrong. According to Harvard Divinity School, hate crimes committed on the basis of religious identity have surged 23%, the biggest growth since 9/11. The FBI reports to us that 11 people were killed in a synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh in 2018, and a mosque was set ablaze in California last March in connection to the New Zealand mosque shootings in early 2019. And those examples are a very small portion of the hate crimes committed just last year. Now today, the ideologies of the religious unaffiliated have been embraced by more and more Americans, as the numbers have risen from 17% in 2017 up to 26% in 2019, according to Pew Research. Robert Worth, a senior editor for the New York Times, shares with us in his article that religious nuns are seeing discrimination for their lack of belief in God, which is bringing more anger out of followers of a particular religion who even themselves are discriminating these people in places like the workplace and in their hometowns. It is important to note here, however, that though the category of non-religious does not fall under a major world religion, America shares in the postmodernism category as its sister cultures across Europe, where the ideologies of relative truth and scientific discoveries are largely present. Atheistic leaders in the scientific community such as Richard Dawkins and the late Christopher Hitchens leading the charge against religion with quotes like, "I'm against religion because it teaches us not to be satisfied with understanding the world, or with not understanding the world. And I leave it to the faithful to burn others' churches and mosques and synagogues, which they can always be relied upon to do." And perhaps these leaders are causing the spike in non-religious numbers to grow and causing young people to leave religion and see it as a menace to our existence. However, Worth also shares with us a story from a former pastor, Jerry DeWitt, who tells us that after leaving the Christian faith was persecuted against with threat calls and community shunning. So it is with a sad understanding that we realize discrimination against the non-religious and religious alike continues to fall into a spiral of hatred and bigotry. There is no other statistic I find more astonishing than that of what Mehdi Hassan, Muslim and scholar, says about this world we live in, taking from a recent study done by Pew. He states that Christians do indeed constitute the most persecuted faith community in the world. They are harassed and targeted in 144 countries, with Muslims harassed and targeted in 142, and Jews in 87. Discrimination exists in every country, including our own. But does it have to? How will we choose to respond? How will we fight against discrimination to stand up for what we know is right? Thank you for listening, and my hope is that I have been able to motivate each of you to understand just exactly what majority religious discrimination is, why it should matter to us, and how we might go about beginning to bring it under a new light, a light of peace and hope. These are my resources. They're quite long. Do you guys have any questions?